Welcome to the Cool Tools Show. I'm Mark Frauenfelder, Editor-in-Chief of Cool Tools, a website of tool recommendations written by our readers. You can find us at cool-tools.org. I'm joined by my co-host, Kevin Kelly, founder of Cool Tools. Hey, Kevin.
Hey, it's great to be here.
In each episode of the Cool Tools Show, Kevin and I talk to a guest about some of his or her favorite uncommon and uncommonly good tools they think others should know about. Our guest today is David Picciuto. He's probably best known for his YouTube channel, Make Something. David has written 2 woodworking books, loves art, music, and go-kart racing, all of which uses plenty of tools, although he claims to have no real connection with them. Hey, David, how are you?
Good. How you doing?
Doing really well, thanks.
We're really glad that you joined us. We're fans of your channel, and can't wait to hear what kind of cool tools you have for us.
Yeah. So, you guys sent over this document to fill out my 4 favorite tools, and I don't know if you get like an update every time I update the document, but I went back and forth like 4 or 5 times throughout the week because, like that intro says, I don't have like this deep connection with my tools. I love Adam Savage, and he has like this intimate relationship with his tools that he just loves, and I don't have that same feeling. So coming up with my 4 favorite was kind of difficult, and I went back and forth, and I thought these are the ones that the ones I'm going to talk about. They're the ones that give me the success that I need to complete my project. So yeah, it was difficult for me.
That's all that's important. And maybe sometimes people get bent up by we're saying your 4 favorite tools. Maybe you could just say, tell us 4 tools that you use. Mm-hmm. Sometimes trying to pick out your favorite child can be kind of delicate. So what's a tool that you use and like?
Well, I think it's the biggest one is my library of books. I've probably got maybe 350, 400 books, somewhere around there. And I've been collecting books for years now. I go to Goodwills or thrift stores, or there's a great website called thriftbooks.com where I just buy used books. And
what kind of books?
Anything that has to do with making or art. So I've got tons of woodworking books and metalworking and DIY art books, how-tos, just galleries, tutorials, anything that has to do with making. I will collect, even if it's something I don't think I'll ever use. Like I'll pick up like I've got like sewing books and jewelry and crafts, and I just like having them for reference.
And that's really interesting because here you are, a YouTuber, someone who is disseminating how on YouTube, and yet you're into the books. Do you find that you learn as much from a book as from another YouTube channel on, say, sewing or knitting or whatever?
So the thing with books is I trust a book more than I trust a YouTube video because
really?
I know the time that it takes to write a book, and it might not always be the case, but it's assumed that the person writing the book is an expert at that thing that they're writing about. So I do trust that. And there was time taken, and usually there's this editorial process where things are, proofread, and you assume that they're accurate. And so I will go to a book before a YouTube video if I have access to it. And I'm assuming there's hundreds of YouTubers out there making stuff. They're probably all getting inspiration from other YouTubers. And I feel like if I get inspiration from a different source, I might come up with my own unique ideas or presentation of it.
I think that's very wise. I think it is true.
And just the other day, we shot a video on bending acrylic and various types of plastics, and I was able to pull 5 books off the shelf and just like get some quick techniques, some ideas. Some of these books were one of them was from the 60s, and there was like all these really cool like bent plexiglass projects in there. I'm like, this is so cool. Like nobody's pulling inspiration from this book, and I can use that for this video. So turns out to be a great tool.
How do you categorize your books so that you can easily find stuff?
So we're in the middle of recategorizing. I say we, I mean me. I'm in the process of recategorizing everything. and there's an excellent phone app called Book Buddy. And if your book has the ISBN number, you can just scan it with your phone and it imports all the information in there. If it doesn't, you can manually type in the ISBN or you can manually key in everything. And I use that. It will try to categorize the books based on its whatever category it thinks it belongs in, but I override that and create my own categories. So I have woodworking, I have wood turning, I have metalworking, I have plastics, I have what I call crafts, and then I have what I call inspiration, which would be just kind of like a collection or gallery type books. And right now on the shelves, they're kind of all mixed up. But as soon as I'm about halfway through of entering all the books into this app, and as soon as I'm done, the shelves are going to get all redone and they're going to be nice and categorized, and I'll be able to find everything based on this app. And I'm going to laser cut these book dividers so all the sections are. I get
cool project.
I get way deep into books.
Right. Yeah, I have about 10,000 volumes here in my library, and we did enter them into a database. So, and label the different locations so we could find books.
What database are you using?
We use Readerware.
Oh,
which was from long ago.
Okay.
I don't know if it's still being kept up with new versions or not, but it was Readerware, and it did allow us to use a little laser reader to like read the barcodes on books as well. So you could just had a little attachment, and a laser reader would read the barcode, and that was all we needed.
There was something like that called Delicious Library. Remember
Well, Delicious
that?
was
yes, I do.
Yeah.
And that when that came out, that was such a beautiful looking program.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
With
and they sold it. They sold it to I don't know. Joshua sold it to somebody, and they immediately ignored it, and it went downhill. So he lost.
Yeah.
He's still infuriated by that to this day, because it was a much better system than anything else since. I need to tell a story about bending plastic, because that was my first job while I was in high school. Was working at a little shop where we bent acrylic at a large scale. Oftentimes, we often took like 4x8 sheets and we bend the entire sheet to make things mostly for department store displays.
So it was all custom work.
It was all custom, one by one. And I spent more hours of my life than I want to ever think about polishing the edges of acrylic.
Oh man.
Like a 1-inch thick edge. Scraping, polishing, buffing. Oh my gosh, I know how to do acrylic.
And so, Kevin, how were the forms made? Were they like bent plywood, or like?
It was all done by hand, each one.
Really?
Because there's a little bit of a what do you call it? Kickback. I mean, so
like backlash,
springback.
Yeah, a springback as it cools, and so we didn't make enough of these. We were only making, I don't know, maybe the most 12 of something at one time. And so we had some jigs and things, but most of it was sort of by hand. So we had huge strip heaters to heat the stuff up, but that smell of warm, slightly melted acrylic is just burned into my neurons.
I bet. Yeah, I think I may have come up with a unique idea to make a strip heater when shooting the video. There's plenty of YouTube videos showing people they'll take like the heating element of a little space heater or a hair dryer, and use that to wire up, a thin piece of wire to make that strip heater. And I bought a single little hot plate burner from the appliance store. It was like $12, and I thought I was going to take the burner off and just run a wire on there and heat up that wire. But it turns out that coil on top was actually bendable. So I was able to take that coil and straighten it out into a nice
Oh,
straight
cool.
line.
Yeah,
And
that's
that
really
was my strip heater. It turned out to be a
that's
really cool little
that's brilliant.
invention.
That's brilliant,
Yeah.
really. So that's the kind of stuff you do, and that's the kind of stuff you get from books, and that's the reason why you want to kind of collect these books and mine them for, ideas that
Yeah.
have gone out of fashion or people have forgotten about.
Yeah, I definitely. And you can just, when I'm bored, I can just pull out a book, and I just love looking at old illustrations because just books were made in a different way years ago because
Yeah.
you couldn't have 100 pages of color photos. Like you had to have somebody illustrate a black and a white image, and I just love those old illustrations.
So if you're a maker and you like black and white images of stuff that are being made, you need to go back into the old Scientific American
Mm-hmm.
handbooks of amateur scientists and stuff for really cool things to make with very simple tools that are really, really neat. And they have beautiful illustrations. They're almost frameable.
Yeah, the I thought you were going to mention you can almost find every single Popular Mechanics magazine from the very first edition. I don't know when that was, the 40s or 50s, and it's all on the archive.org. And so you can go page by page, see all the old ads, see all the old projects in there, and I find that super inspiring.
Oh yeah. And the stable of in-house illustrators that those magazines
Oh
employed were
yeah.
like just the best. And it's like kind of I feel today it's like the barbarians marveling at like the Roman architecture or something. It's just
There
like,
was there was
oh
a
my
great
God.
column from one of those popular science or public mechanics. I think it was called the a wordless.
Yeah, Roy Doty did those
Yeah,
cartoons. He was
right.
really cool. I rediscovered him when I was editor at Make. He was in his late 80s, and I asked him if he would continue to do it for Make magazine. He did a column for Make that was just the same, and he was just a delightful person. He passed away a couple of years ago, but he
Oh,
was
I'm sorry.
extremely active in his like late 80s and early 90s, just cranking out cartoons nonstop. He's a really cool guy.
Right, but to kind of for the readers, this is like a kind of like a comic series about how to do something that didn't use any words. So the design challenge was
Yeah.
to illustrate this and in a way that you didn't even have labels on it, and which is really amazing.
Yeah, it was typically like this dad, and he would see like a kid or his wife complaining about some problem at home, and he'd get a little light bulb over his head, run down to his shop, and show how he made something to solve like hanging a mop in a like a closet or something. But it was always like this clever thing, and he did the whole thing himself with just I don't know how he was extremely prolific. Roy Doty is his name, and look him up online, Doty.
We're kind of being sidetracked by things, but David, you're really inspiring us. What's another cool tool for you, or favorite tool?
Well, before we move on to the next one, I just want to thank both of you for like nerding out with me about books for a second because I didn't know if that was going to count as a tool. Uh,
Sure.
but yeah, so
Yeah, I'm
it was
surrounded
really
by
cool.
like at least 20 linear feet of how-to books
Oh man.
um, from my days at the Whole Earth Catalog, where that was the original genius of the catalog, was listing and describing and promoting how-to books, how to do yourself stuff at a time when there, decades before the internet, when it was very, very difficult to find out any kind of
Mhm.
information. How to make a knife yourself, that was like
Hmm.
gold. Who would know that? Nobody in your neighborhood knew that. And
Right.
so these early how-to books were kind of what I grew up on. And I think you're absolutely right that there's a value, and that's one of the reasons I still have them. Is because they are they are treasures
Hmm.
of ways of thinking, and I'm hoping that someday maybe someone like you would kind of combine some of what books did well with what YouTube does well, and there'd be more diagrams and um,
Hmm.
text in things, so we'd have a kind of a hybrid of those.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. There's so many elements of the book. I mean, Um, man, we could do the whole podcast about books, but like you might have somebody who's a good technical writer. Then you have to have somebody who's a good illustrator, and then a good graphic designer for the cover, because the cover has to sell the book. And there's
Right,
so many
right,
people and so many disciplines involved in making a good book.
right. And so why aren't we doing that in YouTube now? We should be. There should be, a team of people making the
Yes,
best, and I think we might eventually get to that point where we can do that.
yeah, I think so.
So, tell us about another tool that you're excited by.
The next one, this one was difficult. This one was the last second edition, but I did have computer, and then I'm like, no, that's too general. Let's go a little bit deeper, and that's a piece of software called Adobe Illustrator, which I have been using, I think, since maybe 98, 99, when I was in college. And it's so if you're not familiar with Adobe Illustrator, it's a vector drawing program, and I use it to sketch up ideas. A lot of times the finished product might be drawn up in Fusion 360, but most of the time it starts in Illustrator, just because I've been using it for so long and I know how to use a few of those tools, and I can quickly get this sketch that I have on paper into the computer world, where I can then manipulate it to where I want.
And do you input on an iPad, or do you have like a Wacom tablet, or how do you sketch out things?
With a mouse.
With a mouse.
Just with a mouse. I had a Wacom tablet, and years ago, and I used it more for Photoshop stuff. I didn't use it much with the Illustrator. I've been using it with a mouse for 20 some years. My buddy, who's an excellent illustrator, like just really, really good, does it with a trackball. I don't even know if they make trackballs anymore, but he draws everything with a trackball. So yeah, just a mouse.
Wow. And so the fact that you're kind of suggesting it right now means that even despite the fact that there are other drawing programs out there, and some of them are made simpler, that you would still recommend a beginner start with Adobe Illustrator?
I don't know if I could, because like there's a barrier to entry with Illustrator.
There is.
Because of the price.
It's a huge learning curve for me. Every time I go into it, I think I'm pretty convinced that I have forgotten everything that I knew before, and I have to kind of relearn things.
There's so much to learn from it.
Yeah.
I've been using it for, I don't know, how long has it been around? I've been using it ever since the beginning, at least 20 years, right?
It's definitely more than 20 years. It might be 30 years now. It might be the early 90s, late 80s. I don't. It's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
And Mark, every time you go in, you probably have to relearn things, right?
There's there's just always new things to learn too with it, and they change it around a lot. And as David was about to mention, it's expensive, you know, because you have to buy that Adobe Creative
Suite,
and it's, I don't know, it's, what is it, $400 a year now?
I'm paying it's like $55 a month or something like that for the whole suite. And a lot of people didn't like it when they went to the subscription route.
Right.
But
so David, are you aware, or have you tried out any? I know that you're kind of married to Illustrator because it's been there for so long, but have you looked at any others? And if you had to start over again and couldn't afford $50 a month for software, do you have a second recommendation?
I do. It is there's a free one. It's called Inkscape, and I've only dabbled in it just so I could recommend something to other people, because you see me using Illustrator and like, hey, and they find out the cost and are like, what? How can I do this? And so Inkscape is another way around that. I think it's a free software, both Mac and PC.
Yeah, and it runs on Linux too, and I have a Linux laptop that I've hooked up that I use. So,
Mark, are you using Inkscape?
I use it specifically to produce SVG art for my Glowforge laser cutter, which is
perfect for that.
Might as well move to that one, which is your next tool.
Good segue. And real quick, I did look it up. Illustrator came out in 1987, 33 years ago. So yes.
Wow.
So yeah, the next tool is the Glowforge laser cutter, which goes perfect with a vector drawing program like Illustrator. I don't use the laser cutter a lot in the videos, but I'll kind of use it off camera. If I need to make a quick jig for the router, I'll say you can go and cut a circle, or you can cut the shape with a jigsaw, and I won't show that. I'll just have the jig, but behind the scenes, I made that jig quickly with the laser cutter because it's so accurate, and it's a fun, cool digital tool.
Mm-hmm. And did you? Both Mark and I have worked with one of the guys who does software for Glowforge, but it's not the only laser cutter out there. Did you do a lot of research? Have you tried others, and this is the best, or how did you arrive at Glowforge?
So I was working with a woodworking company called Rockler, maybe 5 years ago, 4 years ago, and they were sponsoring some videos, and they said, "Hey, we're going to work with this laser company. Oh shoot, a Full Spectrum." And so they sent me a Full Spectrum laser at that time, as part of the sponsored deal, and so I got to play around with that. And that was before lasers had cameras in them, and the software was. I don't want to. I don't want to crap on anybody else's work, but the software, even at that time, was just like, this is really hard to use, and it's difficult, and it's not laid out well, and it felt like it was going back to Windows 3.1 when I was using it. Now, since then, they've come up with cooler lasers with cameras. They got the cloud software, and their software is really cool. But Glowforge was first to the market, so I was one of the early adopters who bought in the first run and got that Glowforge when it was way cheaper than it is now. So I got pretty lucky hopping on that train.
Okay. Yeah, I know that this is a field that's rapidly progressing, kind of like 3D printers, um, and tell us about what is it that you like about the Glowforge laser cutter.
It was definitely the software. It was like you didn't need to download this complicated application to your computer. It was just take your SVG, load it into the software. You can, because of the laser has the camera built into it, you can see exactly where your artwork is going to be placed on the material, and you can cut that out. And it doesn't help getting to meet the founder or the CEO of the company, Dan. I mean, he's a super cool, nice guy, and he's got all these great ideas. And so, when you meet somebody physically in person, it really helps with that connection, and it helps believe in what they're doing. So, those are the reasons I went the Glowforge route.
Okay. And you would recommend it, though, at this
yeah.
point,
Yeah.
for somebody. And so you mentioned you cut jigs. What other kinds of things have you used it for?
Well, we just recently did it with the acrylic bending. I was able to cut out these shapes on the Glowforge really fast, and there's no cleanup with when you cut acrylic on the laser. It's a nice.
So you were able to do a curve cut with acrylic?
I didn't do any curve cuts. I did basically just the outside cuts. Like I made this wall shelf. Let's say if you had a piece of paper up on the wall, and then you drew you cut an upside down U on that, and then you bent that U down, and that would make the shelf. So it was this one solid piece, and so we made two shelves. And so I was able to cut a couple U's, and then the outside shape, which kind of tapered up to make it look pretty on the laser, and then just bend where that where the shelf needed to bend.
Right.
It was really quick and easy.
Yeah. Lasers and acrylic go together like peanut butter and jelly.
Yes.
Yeah. Except they don't really. I tried to do a curve cut so that I could actually bend a flat sheet, and it just immediately shattered.
Oh.
Can't do it like you can.
What do you mean a curve cut? I'm not sure what you. Oh, you mean like curving in the back, like.
Have you seen like when people cut
plywood
and laser cut like a piece of plywood, and then you can just bend it and have a rounded, like a fillet or a radius instead of a sharp corner, but it doesn't work. Have you ever tried that, David?
No, but that's got some ideas turning in my head, because you could still do the where you're heating down a line, but that curve cut is going to really force, if you have to get really accurate bends and it has to be at this very spot on here, you could use that curve cut to help guide that bend along that curve. So
yeah.
Give it a try.
Yeah. Okay. So Glowforge laser cutter. So what's a fourth pick for you?
That would be my table saw. I mean, as a woodworker, most woodworkers would say the table saw is the centerpiece of their shop. And I'm fortunate enough to have the saw stop. It has the crazy flesh sensing technology in there, so it's nearly impossible to cut your fingers off.
So describe how that works.
So if there's a if any part of you touches the blade, it closes this electrical circuit and it causes a brake to slam on the blade and then pull it underneath the table, all within a fraction of a second. It sounds like a shotgun. It's because it's this really loud release of energy to stop that incredible force of that blade spinning, and it happens so fast that it will barely leave. I've done the hot dog test using a hot dog on there, and it didn't even leave a mark on the hot dog. So it's
That's crazy. Does it like
incredible.
explode some like brake pads against the blades, or like slams it shut or something?
It slams it shut. I'm not sure what the mechanism is on the brake itself. It might be spring loaded. I'm not real sure, but when you do have a brake trigger, you have to replace that brake, which is like an $80 piece,
And the blade too, I think.
and the blade. They say the blade, but I've gotten by with using the same blade over and over again.
And
Thank goodness.
have you actually had it save you a cut?
No,
I
no.
see.
I've had it.
That's
Um,
good.
I've ran a metal jig into the blade, and that tripped it.
Oh.
And then I also had, I'm going to call it a false trigger, but I was running a piece of 2x4, which must have been wet enough to trip the brake.
Oh. So if you can't use wood that's wet.
You right. You can turn the brake off. So
Ah.
yeah, it's like you have to start it up in this certain way, and then it bypasses the brake.
Okay, so you have to be a little bit careful. But and what about if there was a nail inside and you came across a nail? Would that also trigger it?
I don't think so, unless you were touching that nail.
Unless you were grounding it. I see.
Yes. Yep.
Huh. I've heard good things about the saw in general. That it among kind of what we call it heftier or
Yeah.
more premium saws, that this is actually considered a very good saw itself.
Yeah. Even without the safety technology, it is a well built machine. Like a good table saw has a flat top and is also really heavy to control the vibrations, and so it doesn't move and slip. And it's a well built machine even without the brake technology. Like I would recommend this saw because I've had so much success with it.
Yeah, yeah, and it's worth your fingers. I mean, it is
Yes.
worth the price. I'm sure it's not cheap, but yeah.
Yeah, how much is it, by the way? Do you remember?
If I think it's around $2,500. Again, not cheap. I picked a lot of expensive tools, and I apologize. But books,
That's okay.
all my books are nearly all my books are used, and so you can find them for $2-3 at the.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, it averages out. Okay, so we're
yeah,
well, this is yeah, this has been really great. And you kind of in the beginning kind of claimed that you don't have much of an attachment to tools, but in fact you do.
I do. Yes, you got it out of me. Yeah,
Yeah, it's but yeah, you have very select high quality tools, and these are great picks. To tell us more about where people can find you, more about you. You have a channel. Is that the best place?
yes. So I like to direct people right to my YouTube channel, which is called Make Something. YouTube.com/Make Something. And then there's a website, makesomething.com. And, I'm on Instagram and Twitter. And I've actually written a couple of my own books, and we're finishing up the third book now. They're all woodworking books.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
And how did you get started in the YouTubing? Were you a maker beforehand and just transitioned, or were you first doing YouTubing and then started to make?
So I used to work for an ad agency. I started as a graphic designer and then kind of weaseled my way into web development. And I was also the resident photographer there. And so I was around marketing, um, for 10, 12 years. And I always thought I always wanted my own business, but I didn't know what that business was going to be. And, um, you know, 7 years ago, I picked up woodworking as a hobby, and then I just started to document my progress. And because I had this marketing background and I knew about branding and color schemes and layout or whatever, I think I looked a little bit more professional than I was. And then it helped me get this following. And I used to do the show on YouTube called the Weekly Woodworking Wrap Up Review, where I would highlight other woodworkers and just kind of like a weekly news thing. And that helped me get on the map. And then eventually my own projects were the driving force. And the YouTube channel just got so big, I was able to quit my job at the agency almost 6 years ago, and been making YouTube videos ever since.
Well, and that landscape has also changed in those last 6 years in terms of the numbers of people
Oh yeah,
doing
yeah,
similar things.
yeah. YouTube is it's a level playing field. There's not a big television studio, and you don't need a lot of equipment to make a video. I mean, you could basically do it with your phone. And so when I first started, there was only a handful of, I would say, makers or woodworkers doing it for a living, and now there's tons of us, and we're all friends behind the scenes. We're all chatting and we all love each other, and it's one of those things like there's such a huge community, and everybody just loves each other, and it's great.
Wow, it's really fantastic. I know that Make Magazine has been doing videos, and then Cool Tools, we're trying to do more tool review kind of videos. And I've been saying for a long time, I think that the center of the culture has moved away from books to YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And that if you really do want to communicate, you have to kind of you can still make books, but you also have to get good at making YouTubes. So congratulations on your success, and hope you keep making them.
Thank
I'm a
you.
fan, and thanks for joining us and sharing your tools.
Thank you for having me on. Thank you for the book. I love the book.
Oh, yes.
And yeah, it was a pleasure. I just love talking about this stuff. So this was fun.
Hey everybody, it's your host Mark, and I wanted to thank you for listening to the Cool Tools Show. And I also wanted to let you know that we've got a lot more going on at Cool Tools than just this podcast. We also have the Cool Tools website, which has a new tool review every day, and you can get there by going to cool-tools.org. We also have 4 different newsletters that you can subscribe to, and you can subscribe to those from the Cool Tools page. We have this podcast that you're listening to right now. We also have a YouTube channel where we review tools. Check that YouTube channel out by going to youtube.com/cooltools. And one of the things I'd like to ask you is if you're really enjoying everything that we are producing, go to our Patreon page and support us there. You can sign up and give us as little as $1 a month, and that would mean a lot to us. The money that we get from Patreon goes towards a lot of things. We transcribe our podcast interviews so that you can read them online. We pay for editing of our podcasts and for our videos. We pay our contributors. We have video production costs. We have equipment costs. We have hosting costs. And the money you give us through Patreon also goes to support Cool Tools Lab. Anything you give is a huge help. And one of the things that we do is if you are a contributor to Patreon, we'll give you a shout out on air. And so I have a few people here to thank this week. Mark Lyanaj, Micah Gates, Monty Zukowski, Patrick James McNally, Robert Cohen, Scott, Spence Lloyd, Steve Avery, Steve Golden, Steve Levine, Tom Hess, William Phillips, Aaron Nipper, Durab Patel, Glenn Mercer, Jay Walker, Jeff Bonner, Ryan Jarrell, Pat Daly, Patrick Kennedy, Troy Wallet, Mike Camerate, Nicole Harkin, Tim Youssef, Scott Reed. Thanks all of you for supporting Cool Tools. And if you would like to have a shout out, go over to the Patreon page and sign up. And thanks for listening to the Cool Tools podcast. We'll see you next week.